Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Ajay Ramachandran. I'm the Chief Marketing and Product Officer at Dynamic Signal, an innovative startup and tech company based in the Silicon Valley that's pioneering the way brands engage their employees and their customers by enabling them to be brand advocates. We work with a lot of great global companies, many of the Fortune 500 and Global 2000, and some of our customers are achieving tremendous results in social media by getting their employees to be brand advocates. I'm here today with Cheryl and Mark Burgess, the authors of The Social Employee, rather.
Yeah.
And their book describes and discusses how social businesses can empower their employees and executives to be effective advocates and help drive transformation and brand engagement in social media, amongst a number of other great things.
Yes, thank you.
Cheryl and Mark, would you mind introducing yourselves?
So I'm Cheryl Burgess, CEO of Blue Focus Marketing, and this is my co-author, Mark Burgess, who is the president of Blue Focus
Right,
Marketing.
and I work for Cheryl.
No, that's not true. But we are co-authors.
Right, social branding firm, and we're basically interested in engaging brands and trying to leverage social and to find great ways to do that.
And Mark, that was very diplomatic, by the way.
Thank
You are a good husband.
Yes,
Cheryl, you're very lucky.
I am
And
very
likewise.
a good partner.
We're very
yes.
good. We work together
Right.
really well. So for us working together, we learned how to do that in college. I won't tell you the year we graduated. I
it was
will
a while
tell
ago.
you that we learned a lot about how to work together in college, and that kind of built our relationship. And today we're able to work together because of that foundation. We were both journalist majors.
Right.
So that helped today. At that time, it really wasn't important. Journalism wasn't
Right.
important. Today, it's about brand content, what youth know,
Right.
what's so happening in the employee world. So why don't you tell us more about the survey and the studies that were founded today? That was exciting.
Sure. Well, we released a really exciting survey today. It's the Social Selling Report, and it's a study of 1,000 salespeople at large enterprise companies, and it really kind of builds the case for why you need to empower your social employees to be advocates. And in the social selling survey, what we discovered was that social employees outperform
That's right.
their peers. They're more effective closers, and they win and drive and generate more revenue. They create more leads for their brands. And are more engaged as employees in general. So they're actually retained longer, and those social salespeople stick around and participate and drive a lot more enterprise value over time. What's interesting about the social employee and what you guys have spent a lot of time studying and thinking about is the various kind of engagement models and frameworks that different brands apply to helping their employees be effective and to be social. I think one of the most telling examples is Southwest Airlines.
Yes. Right.
And how effective they've gotten in empowering their employees. I'd love to kind of get your perspective on why Southwest is a pioneer and how they did it.
Sure. Well, Southwest, when you think about Southwest as a brand, they were actually a social brand before anyone ever coined the phrase social brands. And they do a tremendous amount of work within their own employee base to make sure they're communicating to their employees properly. Employees are then taking the messages back and putting that back into social media. They do a lot of special training of their own executives.
Right.
So the realization that it's the social executive that becomes the catalyst for every one of the brands in our book to really excite and get people involved in what's really important in the market. And so social engagement starts with a social executive, and all drives all the way down to the social employee, who is then empowered, and you work to motivate them and train them and give them very specific guidelines. So, for example, Southwest has a wonderful social media policy that tells employees exactly what the guidelines are, what they need to do, and they enable them to go and do that, and they do it for their brand. And there's tremendous trust that's built up when the employee is talking about the brand as opposed to the brand just talking about the brand, let's say, in traditional marketing terms.
That's fantastic. The Edelman Trust Barometer actually highlights that kind of fantastic dynamic. If I remember correctly, I think it's 51 employees are trusted 51% more than corporate or brand messages when communicating essentially the same message, right? Southwest Airlines is wonderful and great. If an employee says that, it's 51% more effective than if the brand themselves put out that message.
Exactly. I mean, when you think about social media, what it's all about is trust. So when you apply that to employees and the opportunity to build trust between the individual and the brand. And the other amazing thing is that the employee is not only representing their brand, they're representing themselves. So you've got their personal brand kind of wedded to the brand that they work for. So it's sort of an automatic win-win. And we've identified a number of examples in the book where different brands are just incredibly, or employees are excited about being able to work and develop content and to curate and send out content and to work on behalf of their brand. And just great stories in the book in that regard.
So the big question that we always hear in the market, and certainly from our customers, we're working with brands like Intel and a variety of other large enterprises, Hitachi Data Systems, and a number of others that are empowering their employees to be social. One of the first questions that we always get is, well, what's in it for the employee? Why should they care? Why should they participate in a program like this? How is Southwest Airlines, or are there any other kind of good examples and case studies from your book that address what the benefit is for the employee?
There are. I mean, there's several. I mean, one comes to mind. It's actually the smallest brand of the 8 in the book. It's a brand named Domo. They're involved with business intelligence. And they've done a lot of amazing social surveys among their employees, trying to really get them to be engaged in social for the brand. And what they find is they're not only engaged, they do public leaderboards, they encourage them to tweet and to blog and to be very involved in social. And they now find that it's not a matter of the employees, you will do this, it's we want to do that. So they are engaging them, they are training them, and they actually have people that can't wait to work for this brand because fundamentally their belief was, like a lot of other brands, that if we don't do this, the competition is going to come in and they're going to take our market. So we are going to be leaders in this area. We're going to gauge our success based on the social power of our employees, and the employees have a stake in that. And so their employees are helping the brand and they're helping themselves. So indeed, this is not a forced fit. This is a win-win for both parties.
So the employee gets to build their own personal brand.
They do. Correct. They do. They get to build their personal brand, and I think that's the most important part, because brands cannot communicate externally unless they communicate internally. And they need to do that first. They need to build up that brand presence. And in order to do that, we just cannot put the whole onus on employees. We need to bring that conversation to the social executive. Because the social executive, he or she, is the brand catalyst. He's the catalyst that actually infuses the mission, the vision, and the value into the corporate structure. And they build an empowered base of employees. And we have the Mobius strip. Mark, you should talk a little bit about the Mobius strip, because that is in the book. And the book, by the way, gets we talk more about that.
Well, I think the Mobius strip is actually one of the most revelatory kind of findings in the book. I thought that was the most fascinating part of the book, actually, and that's the reason why everyone needs to buy the book. At least one of the probably 10 reasons.
I appreciate that.
But I love the kind of the notion of the continuous, never-ending loop that really is conveyed through the Mobius strip example. So walk us through that a little bit more.
Sure. I mean, basically, it starts with a concept called the Mobius strip, which is you can actually create one by cutting a piece of paper and folding it around. And the point is that you can go across all different dimensions of that strip without having to ever leave or take your finger off the page. So what it relates to as a process is looking at starting out with when you're trying to build a social brand, and you have social employees on one side, you have social customers on the other side. So the Mobius strip is a process to get your brand and the message from initial engagement all the way through to working, perhaps co-creating with your customers, and then driving, taking the learnings, driving results, relearning, reapplying what you've learned. So indeed, it really is continuous. But it's done by, and one of the other things we've found in a very interesting way is that social customers want to talk to social employees. So the brands that are actively engaged with their employees are going to find customers who want to engage that way. It's the brands that are not engaged with their own employees that are actually may lose out over time. So there's an opportunity to build a bridge between the social employee and a social customer.
And that makes so much sense. We're really seeing that with our customers as well. Oakley, for example, we're working with Oakley Women's Apparel, and they've combined their employees and their customers and their celebrities and sponsored athletes, their super influencers, all in one advocacy program. And they've created a conversation and a dialogue amongst all of those constituents. They collaborate together, they co-create content, they share and amplify that content, and they also compete for bragging rights.
I heard you say at the booth, we were talking, and I heard you demonstrate about this one employee who is now the lead. She has a new title.
That's right.
Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, it's really exciting. We have, a lot of our customers are seeing this dynamic unfold, which is a social employee will start communicating and engaging customers and driving and influencing sales and generating leads. And those interactions are gold for the brand because the brand is getting an authentic engagement with customers, and it's driving a business outcome like leads or sales or coupon redemptions, whatever it might be. And that's happening over social media, over Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, other social channels. And when that happens, we're able to track and measure and attribute the outcome to the employee that shared or started the conversation. It's groundbreaking for the employee because what it does is it provides an opportunity for that employee to be recognized. Think of the employee of the week in McDonald's. Imagine
or
that.
Your parking spot. This is like your digital parking spot.
Yes,
digital parking. You like that?
I love that. We should
like a digital parking spot.
That's going to be the meme. That's a Twitter meme.
I love that creativity.
So the digital parking spot, right? Think of that, or the employee of the week. It's really taking that idea and putting it on steroids and allowing a brand to celebrate their employees and their contribution to the brand's success. And oftentimes we find that intrinsic motivation is more powerful than any other compensatory type of motivation, whether it's money or bonuses. Just being recognized for what you do is very powerful. And we're seeing a lot of brands kind of tap into that opportunity to recognize employees, reward them, give them a spotlight, help them build their personal brand while they simultaneously build the enterprise brand.
It reminds me of an example. I mean, part of what you need to do is get the employees involved in terms of guidelines, what it is they can do, what they can't do. Some brands just don't do that at all. So there are a number of stories in the book about how you do that. Adobe, for example, instead of calling it social media policy or guidelines, they refer to it as guardrails. So if you think of what that conveys, right? So the idea of you're driving down the road and the guardrail keeps from going off the edge. So it's sort of a subtle reference, and it's basically we're going to empower you, we're going to train you, and we're going to provide incentives to you. And what you generally find is a true social employee loves what they're doing, and this becomes such a fundamental part of their job and what they do. And so in some ways, employee advocacy and having platforms like Dynamic Signal that really make it easy and simple takes away the worry of, well, gee, it's another thing I need to do. It's like, not only does this make sense for the brand, it makes sense for me as an individual, and it's something I love to participate in. So we're finding that these kinds of tools and brands that really empower and train their employees are the ones that are going to be way out there in the next 3 to 5 years, as opposed to brands that are hesitant to even move forward.
Well, and that's another really interesting kind of part of your book where you talk about how some brands kind of backed away from this idea of employee advocacy in the social media world. They backed away from the idea of employee advocacy out of fear and concern. And it's interesting because I always say, if you asked any CEO 10 years ago who their best brand ambassadors were, that CEO would have unequivocally answered that their employees are their best brand ambassadors. But social media has made that really awkward and kind of uncomfortable for the CEO because now every employee has a global stage, can go out there in social media and reach tens of thousands or even millions of potential customers. And there's risk and there's fear. Oh my gosh, what if my employee goes out and says the wrong thing or is inappropriate?
Right.
So how are brands, how are these brands getting past that concern? What are they doing to overcome
Well,
that?
let me
fear?
say,
I think we're on the wrap though, guys. Both of you. Did you know we got signals here? We got a wrap.
All right.
Let's hit this
Well, back
question.
to, I
Okay,
mean,
we have-
the quick answer, and there are 8 different stories in the book that very quickly will talk about the guidelines, the policy, the guardrails. Armed with that, you almost can't really make drastic mistakes. If you go into it without a policy and just have people do their own thing, of course you're going to find variations. But if you empower them, if you give them the guardrails, if you incent them to do the right thing, they're absolutely going to do it, and they're going to love what they're doing. And it's really, so it's the idea that people will be inspired at what you're doing. If you just pay them, they'll take their paycheck. If you're inspiring them with like their own blood, sweat, and tears, what they're going to put into it, they're going to love what they're doing. It's going to help the brand.
We want them to love themselves and love the brand at the same time.
Of course.
So it's the brands that do this now that are going to win. And part of the help is having platforms like your employee advocacy program to make it work for the employee and make it work for the brand.
That's great. Well, and we're definitely seeing that as well. Just to end on one of my favorite quotes from one of our customers, Sabrina Stoffridgen, who's speaking here tomorrow. I think her session is just before yours.
Okay.
And Sabrina, in kind of a moment of profound wisdom, told us, Intel doesn't launch products, our employees do. And I really love that because it really kind of drives home the point that it is about the employee, and the employee is the brand and drives the brand message. And if you embrace that and empower them,
That's so cool.
they'll be
That's
very
good.
successful.
That's a wonderful way to end.
And and I know you guys are speaking tomorrow as well with.
Yes, we are. Yeah, I mean,
David
we're
Edelman,
talking about.
McKinsey.
We have David Edelman from McKinsey. We have Dana Williams from Southwest Airlines, and we're talking about innovation, kind of branding from the inside out. Basically, that it happens from the inside. To do it right externally, you need to start it internally. So there's the best kept secret in the world is the social employee, empowering them and making them work for your brand.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time today. Thanks for everyone who tuned in remotely. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit any of us up on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Thank
Twitter.
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So long.